Welcome to a LTTV special of sorts, you could say, in which tonight, with those in the most senior positions at the club, we are endeavouring to try and lay out what is essentially the state of play financially for the short and long-term future of Leicester Tigers, given the current situation and given the impact of what has been a challenging time for sport globally and rugby in particular. In a period of so much unknown and contradictory media reports, as well as speculation across online forums from fans, from season ticket holders, from everybody in the game, it felt only right to, I guess, put some people under the microscope with their permission to try and cut through what has been a lot of conjecture and ask those questions that we feel season ticket holders and supporters have felt have maybe gone unanswered or have been answered in various forms with rumours across the World Wide Web and the joy of social media at times, unfortunately, doing so. So with all of that in mind, I will welcome to LTTV some well-known faces as well as one new face for supporters to get to know. Our chairman, Peter Tom, our newly appointed CEO, Andrea Pinchen. The new face is our interim finance director, Fintan Kennedy, who recently joined the Tigers board among a handful of changes at the top level. The man with the longest title in world rugby, the current head coach and incoming director of rugby, Geordan Murphy, as well as the man who rivals him in the title race, McGinity, who is the club's head of elite performance recruitment. So I guess to start, I do have to say thank you to you all for joining me. I appreciate that at this time, there's a lot going on, and for some of you, it's not all rugby. It's a hell of a period of unknown, and it's a hell of a period of, I guess, concern, you could say. So to kick it off right at the top, I will place our new CEO, Andrea, under the spotlight, and I'll ask the obvious question to start. And Andrea, I guess the question there is, how much income or projected income and revenue has the club lost during this period?
So realistically, looking at the remainder of the season and the unknown around that, we've got 5 home games and across tickets and hospitality, just as a starting point, really, that's looking at circa £420,000 per game. So add that into other areas of revenue that we are losing. So again, about £75,000 per game on incremental spend in the bars and the food outlets. And then you start getting into elements of cast game, where we were looking at additional revenue to that as well, because it was an additional game for us. What would that lead to? So on and so forth. So they're the numbers that you're talking. In a roundabout ballpark figure, 2.1 million over 5 games. And
I guess the obvious question there is that, given that it is assumed we may play behind closed doors if we return this season, is that income and revenue that we will never see again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at all opportunities of how we can generate revenue, how we can have supporters into the ground. But again, we don't want to be bringing staff back off of the furlough scheme, which is helping us financially tread this path, in order to secure incremental funding that may cost us more than the initial bringing the staff back. So yeah, unfortunately, it's, we're talking big numbers, and there's still, even with the cost savings we've put in place, money coming out of the club at a rate of knots, and that money's not coming in.
Sam, if I could just embellish Andrea there, and the 2.1 million. I mean, that is part of the reduction in turnover, of course, towards our financial year end, which is the 30th of June. But yeah, to add to the 2.1 million, which is effectively the rugby income, we also have the commercial income, of course, and we have PRL income.
Yeah.
So in total, towards the end of June for our financial year end, we are looking at a total loss of revenue of about 5.1 million.
And I guess, given the current situation too, and on top of what Fintan's saying, the other element there, and one that you understand particularly well, Andrea, is partnerships and sponsors. So I would assume, and this is, you know, whether or not I'm saying it in the right way, but as a partner of the club and as a sponsor of the club, you couldn't be faulted for wondering whether or not it was a worthwhile investment given the current situation. So is that income as well that's being lost at the moment? Is there a worry that partners will leave the club, or the income from partners that was projected to come in will also be lost?
Look, you know, the people are the most important part of this club, whether that's internally or externally, our season ticket holders or sponsors. We've been so fortunate with the support that our partners have shown, both centrally and also our own club partners and the wider Leicester business community. So we've actually secured additional sponsorship through this time. But let's not kid ourselves. People do invest in Leicester Tigers because of the people that come and the fan base, and that's what they want to be selling their products into. So at the moment, you know, we've had nothing but support from all of the people associated with the club, and we can't thank them enough for that. You know, as I say, new sponsors coming on board as well as some renewing through this difficult time has really given us a boost. To also their opinion on the surety of us and their support of that is a huge piece for us.
Fintan, if I can ask you regarding what you mentioned around central funding, can you just divulge a little bit about what it is that at the moment is not coming in from that regards?
Yeah, I mean, so the you'll have heard that that BT have paid up the remaining part of their contract for this year, which is really, really good news. However, we've got to remember that's split 13 ways. And even if it's split 13 ways, we only get 73% of that 13 ways, if you understand me. So it's really, really difficult to put a finger on where we will be going in terms of distributions for PRL at the moment. Nobody knows when we're going to return to play properly and what conditions we will return to play under, whether we've got fans, some fans or no fans. So really trying to put a finger on that at the moment is very difficult and very, very difficult to forecast.
It's certainly a baptism of fire for yourself to arrive into. Peter, it's probably a nice one to bring you in on because you are involved in more meetings than anyone else with each of the other Premiership clubs, of which, of course, involves Newcastle as well as Saracens in terms of relegation and promotion for next season. Is this a case of clubs doing whatever they can by themselves and just going out one-off and doing what they think's necessary? Or are all of the clubs involved with Premiership Rugby Limited and, of course, the RFU, are they working together to try and find a solution?
We are, since the outbreak of this and you know, second week of March, we've been having, you know, at least a meeting a week of Premier Rugby, reviewing all of the different circumstances. And I think at the beginning, you know, nobody got any idea necessarily what was going to happen. And there was some perception that we may well start playing at the end of April. And I think the good news in the meeting board, which Chris Boyd of Bristol currently chairs on behalf of Premier Rugby, which involves the union and the PRA, and that we're back to, it's been agreed to start phase 1 training, and maybe Georgie will touch on that later, but our intention at Leicester is that would start on the 15th of June. And then, you know, we've always maintained that the most important bit was obviously the financial health of the company to ensure that we come out the other side of this. And then secondly, and more importantly, you know, the health and safety of everybody who works for the Tigers, whether that's the kit man, the players, or somebody in the ticket office. And that you know, I on the board will not do anything that puts that at risk.
So I guess one from Andrea and Fintan's perspective as well is you added that there are other sources of income. Andrea, from a perspective of Leicester Tigers and of course Welford Road as a venue, there's also been a serious amount of lost income in terms of basically the place has been shut down.
Yeah, so since the 24th of March, the stadium has been closed for business, if you like. So that's conference and events. You've got all of our community team who would have been delivering programs into schools and getting funding for doing that. We've been doing some of that remotely via Zoom, as everybody else has, but you know, the Tigers Challenge that we have at the Butlins camps as well. So all of those initiatives that we have as a business, rather than just our match day business, have pretty much all been on hold, if not some of them very much pared back, because we're unable to deliver in this time. And interestingly, on the conference and events piece, that you do see a change in the world over in how businesses operate, with the trust now being there for people to be working at home more, and with Microsoft systems and Zoom systems, etc., that communication isn't about necessarily getting everybody in one room for a conference anymore. So that conference business is going to be a challenge for us to pick up on the other side of this, as businesses will look to, do I spend that money on conferences? Do I spend it elsewhere in my business? How is that generating and making money for me?
You mentioned the community programs. Does that mean, or do you foresee then that an area which the club is extremely proud of in terms of doing what it does in the community, and, you know, to, I guess, quote the chairman who's on the call, is a few weeks ago he mentioned that regarding the non-sale of the club, it was felt that maybe those that were suitors to purchase it weren't looking at those areas of which Leicester Tigers feels it has a social responsibility. Do you feel that moving forward there's going to be an impact on the way in which and how much the club can do in the community?
Undoubtedly, in the short to mid-term, you know, we have a foundation that is set up to enable some funding to come in. But the SWIFTS program that was really gathering some traction in our wider community, that brings rugby to everybody from a diverse culture that is our city that we're proud of. All those elements, you know, we aren't able to go into schools, we aren't able to integrate those. The women's game was a huge thing for us as a focus that we want to push forward. But all these things take money. In order for us to set up, you know, we can go out and secure sponsorship for some of it, but all of these elements are things that we want to support in the community, and where we currently are with, as Fintan says, you know, sort of a circa £5 million loss, we are having to look at every avenue of spend and reassess every program and product that we are working on.
So, Peter or Fintan or both, what's the role of the Tigers board in terms of that regard? And when you look at what you have said publicly is something that the club must do and will continue to do, if cost cutting is in place, and as Andrea says, it's inevitable, it's unfortunate, but it's inevitable, what is the Tigers board doing in terms of prioritising those initiatives, as well as prioritising the simple fact, and to quote Andrea, that rugby is our business, making sure the rugby gets back on the pitch as well?
I think, Sam, on the interview that I had with you a few weeks ago, I mentioned, you know, Eric Lacey, and Eric, you know, hammered into me, and I've tried to make sure that everybody who joins the board buys into this. We're custodians, and, you know, our job is to be there, take the club through whatever crises we face, to make sure we come out the other side. And you know, I've been thrilled with the way in which our supporters, you know, everybody who works in the business, our sponsors, as Andrea said, everybody's support has been outstanding. And I think, you know, the fact that we decided not to sell the club and effectively create a new board, and the new board meets, you know, regularly every Friday, and has been incredibly constructive and helpful in terms of what we're doing. And so for me, this is all about custodianship. And it's, you know, this is Tigers. We want people in 20 or 30 years to look back and say, well, they didn't do too bad a job of getting through this particular crisis. So it's all about custodianship.
So, Fintan, if I can ask, I guess you wouldn't have predicted coming into the role, or certainly the board role, first and foremost, not even the interim finance director role. You couldn't have predicted coming into a pandemic. Is it yourself that is basically been charged with sorting through those numbers and trying to sift through the black and white of it all?
So just a bit of background. I came in February, I think it was, or early March, Sam. So yeah, it was it was firstly a good time to come in, because always joining a board of the stature of Leicester Tigers is an absolute honour, and I'm delighted to be here. I think we have a very, very good board now, and you're just talking about the community, and I think investment in the community has been a bedrock of Leicester Tigers from my understanding of Leicester Tigers over the years, and I think that will continue. There's no doubt that it will. It's massively, massively important. Down to the numbers, I mean, that's a combination of myself, Andrea, and many others within the club who are really reviewing every aspect of the club to ensure that we come out of the pandemic in a very, very strong position. I mean, we came into it in a good position. Obviously, you've heard of the impact of a loss of revenue of about 5.1 million this year. We don't know where that's going to go in July, August, September until we have clarity. But I have no doubt, with the support of everybody on this call and throughout the club, that we will come out stronger from this.
Is this a little bit, and it's probably one for you, Andrea, and even Geordan, to a point of, is this almost a mess that, for want of a better word, that has been created because of the amount of supporters we have and the way in which the club's modelled, which is, the well-known term of not having a sugar daddy, so to speak, but the fact that we do rely heavily on the biggest crowds in the game, the biggest season ticket holders numbers in the game, and it's almost a mess that we're proud of.
I think I know what you're saying. You're not calling out, are you? No. Yeah. Look, it's going to impact us more than anybody else, because we do have that strong support. But what a great thing that is, and that's, yes, it will impact us more, but it will also help us get out the other side of this. And that's what it's all about. It's, for us, everyone wants the same thing. Whether you're working in the club, you're supporting the club, we're all passionate about it. And all that we want is for this club to still be here, for the game to still be here, and for it to be stronger in 10, 20, 50, 100 years' time, so that, all of our families and future generations can support the Tigers. That's what it's all about. So, yeah, we're all in it together, and it's a challenge because of the numbers, but also it will be probably a great saving grace for us as we come out the other side.
Yeah, I think that's really eloquently put from Andrea. Are we proud of the mess that we're in? If that means we're proud of this amount of season ticket holders we have and the amount of people we have through the gates at a home game, then yeah, we're very, very lucky. We've been through some tough times. Leicester supporters have stuck with us through thick and thin, and this is going to be a difficult period. But like Andrea said, I couldn't think of better supporters to stick with us to get us through the far side in a strong position.
So, I guess regarding cost cutting, the biggest area that fans want to know about, because it's been well publicised around decisions on the salary cap. Obviously, players, staff, coaches, everybody's taken pay cuts. It's not just limited to Leicester Tigers. It's across the league. It's across the world. In sport, it's across the world in industries. What is the financial impact on the rugby program at Leicester Tigers, especially entering what was and still is an exciting era or new look era for the club? But also, I would imagine some things are going to have to be brought back a little bit, and maybe those things that money was looking to be spent on can't be spent on given the current pandemic. Probably one for Fintan.
Look, I think, Sam, we're talking about the mess. We're incredibly proud of the way that we're dealing with the mess. And, in times like this, unfortunately, hard decisions do need to be made. And, obviously that impacts human capital as well. And, but it's not just that. It's all costs across all of the club, whether it's a cleaning contract, a security contract, we're looking at everything to make us stronger coming out the other side. And actually, you know, are we proud of the mess you referred to? It's the way we're dealing with it, I think, is what we're proud of most, and will ensure that we do come out stronger. There's no doubt about that.
I think as well, sorry, I think as well, Sam, you know, I saw on one of the social media, you know, the pitch. The fact is we've carried on investing in the pitch. It looks in, you know, great condition. You know, we've continued to look after the facilities at Oval Park. And, you know, the one thing amongst all of this is we recognise that ultimately our success is what happens on the pitch. Mm-hmm. And all the things we're doing to a degree are to ensure that we're able to give Geordie, Steve and everybody else, you know, the tools and the players that they need to ensure us that we get back to the top.
Yeah.
So I want to touch on that a little bit later, and especially with Jan and Geordan moving into not only next season but the seasons beyond that are being planned for. But before I do, one of the hot topics obviously is that, you know, season ticket holder A and match ticket purchaser B, all of these people that have purchased to Tigers events, Tigers rugby camps, games, as I say. Andrea, what is in place for those people, or what is being planned to not only honour tickets for those people, if it's doable, obviously, as Peter says, under strict health and wellbeing guidelines, and that's the first and utmost important point. But what is the club planning to do for season ticket holders and match ticket purchasers around the money that they have essentially invested in the club?
So before we go on to the money, and obviously that's the key point here, is the work behind the scenes that's going on for us at the moment is a lot of risk assessment, looking at various opportunities that if we are at all able to get crowds into Welford Road, what does that look like? How many are we safely able to have into a stadium with a circa 26,000 capacity? And that is being looked at behind the scenes, along with every other scenario that we're presented with, and there are many. But ultimately, we need our supporters to know, you know, what's happening with their money and what the opportunities are. So we are going out over the next 2 days, and it will be live from Monday, for each season ticket holder, each match ticket purchaser, to be able to make a choice as to what they would like to do with the money should games be cancelled, played behind closed doors, or indeed moved to other stadia. So there are options on there, there are scenarios on there, and they are able to choose one of three options. The first is to donate into the club, to invest in the future of the Tigers together as we come out the other side, and we'll look to show a lot more around what that investment has helped us to achieve as we do come through the other side. The second is a credit note, so that moving forward, when we do have games back, that they are able to hold that money, if you like, against match tickets, hospitality, and when we've grabbed the retail with both hands, also the club shop. Or of course the refund option for those that want to take that. So we'll be sending all that information round. There'll be forms for people to fill in, because we do have a lot of staff on furlough, although we will be bringing people back to answer questions. If you fill your form in, we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can, and we'll process it all as soon as we possibly can. And all the detail will be on there, so that all the season ticket holders, as I say, match ticket holders, etc., are able to make an informed decision as to what they want to individually choose to do with the money that they have within the club at the moment.
So to clarify, they will obviously have a choice, and there's, I guess, certainly there is, nobody is suggesting either way is a better option. It's obviously down to individual circumstances. But if I can ask Fintan, and I don't know whether or not it's a figure of which can be bandied around or if it's able to be asked, but what exactly is the investment in the club in terms of how much money is raised by season ticket holders each season?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So if we look at the 14-15 season, when we had roughly 15,000 season ticket holders, and that dropped to about 13,500 season ticket holders last year. And if we can bridge that gap, that 1,500 spectator gap, you're talking in the region of £500,000 to the club, which is obviously a huge, huge number. And, you know, the supporters are hugely important, and, you know, we encourage them all to support the club in this time.
So if I can ask a rugby question while I want to stick on the money and keep the pressure on you guys a little bit for fans out there, if it's okay, is from your perspective, Geordie, you're almost in a better situation here than most head coaches or director of rugby's, you and Steve, because if and when crowds can come back in, obviously at limited capacities, Welford Road is one of the venues that holds the most. So there is a potential here that Leicester Tigers could and will have a crowd of sorts there to support the team.
Yeah, it's something that we're looking at. Obviously, we're conscious to adhere to the social distancing, but the fact that Welford Road is one of the biggest stadiums around hopefully will afford us the ability to get fans into the stadium. We've talked already today and numerous times over the course of the season about how passionate our fans and how they are willing to go to any length to support us. So it is exciting. Having that season ticket base and having the support that we do behind us, again, will help us transition out quicker than other teams. And as you said, although we're in a weakened position now, we're confident that we will be in a strong position on the other side of COVID.
You mentioned those options, Andrea. I'm assuming that these options are being presented based on feedback already and communications already from supporters. You said partners have recommitted during this and new partners have come on board. I'm assuming the options available are based on what we've received from fans or season ticket holders already. Yeah,
we wanted to be driven really by what the fans' suggestions were around this. This is unprecedented times for all of us, of course. So, what were they thinking? What were they feeling? What was the general consensus? We have a supporters forum that meets that any fan can apply online to sit on. There's a lot of information that's discussed there that we actually get sort of present certain circumstances, certain situations, such as this, such as the retail, and those supporters give us very honest feedback as to what they think the right thing to do for the club is and what the supporters would want to see. So that was a huge piece of this, and a lot of this has come from that. But also, we've been inundated, I'm sure everybody on the call has, with emails and calls of both individuals, season ticket holders, those that can't be a season ticket holder because they live miles and miles away but have got Leicester Tigers, running through their veins. And also the business network, where they're like, what do you need from us? We will help you. We will support you. And so all these things have been run by a group of people. And these three elements of what's come out of that. So, the donate, the credit or the refund. And one doesn't make you. I know there's a lot of talk going around about, I'm a better fan than you are because I'm doing this. Everyone's circumstances are different, and the fact that you are passionate about Leicester Tigers, well, look, that's good enough for me. And all of us, as we've said continually, we want the same thing. Whoever we are, whether we're one of us sitting on this call, whether you're a season ticket holder at home, we want to watch Leicester Tigers win in the future. And that's what it's all about.
I think as well, Sam, certainly the most important bit, and for me the most sort of almost emotional moving bit, has been how supportive collectively, I've had some nice phone calls from supporters, I've had emails, we've had some lovely emails from some of the nurses at the Royal for the parking, which is really not much of a gesture in terms of what they're doing. And I just feel, some people want to know what's happening, and I understand all of that and perhaps get a bit irritated. But the thing for me is, it's certainly come out of this that, we're all in this together. Mm. And it's sort of Leicester and the East Midlands and all those sort of things. And so I think we've been and to a degree, us on this call a little bit I think we've been, really, really moved by how supportive people have been right across the piece. And even, I had one from one lady who was sort of saying that, they were struggling a bit financially, but she still wanted to keep a season ticket home to help the club. And it's a huge responsibility for us as well to make sure we deliver for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no pressure, Geordan.
Sorry, Geordie.
It's all right.
Yeah, and if I can throw a spanner in the works here, I guess you're in constant communication with players and agents who are either incoming to the club or potential incoming to the club in seasons to come. One of the biggest selling points I imagine you use is the fact that playing at Welford Road in front of a Tigers crowd is like no other. This isn't going to be the case for some of them when they arrive. Has there been any communication with you around those? And obviously you need to keep an eye on this, because when you're out there as the salesman, I'm assuming you're having to defend questions on the fact that it might be an emptier terrace than they're used to.
There is that, Sam, but you have to remain positive. And you look at it from that aspect. Yes, we do sell the fantastic match day experience, 26,000 supporters going crazy, a beautiful pitch that we've seen recently on social media. But the other thing is that we have world-class supporters, whether that's on or off the field, world-class sponsorship rights. But the individuals, they're coming to play for, as Peter alluded to earlier, they're just custodians of a shirt with a major history within the English game. And I think they're just proud to be part of something they know will improve. And I think we've also made, as we've touched on historically, huge strides on the coaching front. And actually what we're offering is world-class options in that front. So Geordie's now got the team that he can rely on, in the sense of Steve behind him, Aled behind him, Rob Taylor coming in with some new ideas from Australia. So as much as, yes, we're in the same boat as everyone else and we aren't able to currently fill our stadium, the reality is behind the scenes we've got a world-class setup, and a world-class setup in Oval Park that we can still rely on. And the players just can't wait to get over here. And the other thing is that this hasn't just affected the English market. Every single one of those players is coming from a league that's either had, basically in France, it's completely stopped. South Africa's been in lockdown. I think they're allowed to buy alcohol for the first time in 2 months, so you can probably know how chaotic it is over there. Australia's had 65% pay cuts. In some instances in New Zealand, they'd have 50% pay cuts. So every single country that rugby is played in has been affected. So yes, we are in uncertain times and unprecedented times. I'm sure we all heard that on numerous occasions. But the players coming in have been kept in regular communication with our team manager, with Geordan, with Steve, with Aled now. They know exactly what's going to be required of them when they do get onto the grounds. And in some instances, some of them will have to do 2 weeks quarantine. But they just can't wait to get started in the Leicester Tigers shirt, and we can't wait to see them play.
So I guess we've touched on a lot of what is essentially outgoing or lost money. Andrea, Fintan, Peter, have there been any income streams created during this period?
One of the
LTTV. Sorry, go on, Andrea.
One of the biggest pieces we've been working on, obviously, is the retail, the merchandising. So we're really excited to have that back in-house. We've had to spend money on securing the stock, of course, but we are aware that for, certainly the coming 2 or 3 months, that may be our biggest income generator. And most of the staff that aren't on furlough have been working towards that, making sure that we do have stock to sell, that it isn't a case of, oh yes, do you want to pre-order and it'll come after things are delivered in the shop, etc., etc. So all of those issues will be eradicated. The quality will be there. We hope that the supporters, they'll certainly talk about the shirts. They like them. And that there'll be a lot of choice for people and for an opportunity for people to get back behind the club in that field, because really, we know in the past few seasons it's not actually been what it should have been.
I think as well, Sam, through Premier Rugby, we've been actively involved with BT and trying to work out how we can create things that are of interest to our supporters and to BT and everybody else when we're even playing behind closed doors. And I've had some conversations with you, I know about, can we come up with some other ways of generating income? But in actual fact, whatever we do, I mean, it all helps. But as Andrea said, very early doors in Fintan, unfortunately, what's happened in the last 8 or 10 weeks has cost us £4 or £5 million. I think the other decision that we made, which I think has really helped us, was to make sure that the money that the 12 million or so we received from CVC was invested in the club. And that's put us in a very, very strong position going into this. Although, as Fintan has correctly pointed out, we're currently hemorrhaging a lot of cash as we're sitting here talking to you now.
So I guess the only point I'd want to just address there, Andrew, is you mentioned the retail and obviously the potential income from the retail. That's not something that was necessarily added to the outgoings at this time, if that makes sense, was it? Because that was already in place, and that money, it's certainly still safe, isn't it? The retail is still coming in-house at Leicester Tigers.
The retail is most assuredly still coming back in-house at Leicester Tigers. And the launch is happening this month, later on this month. And pre-order availability will go out. So yeah, it's very much it's been planned for a long time. We're wanting to drive the revenue from that, of course, but neither the costs nor the income is sort of a surprise to the cash flow forecast that Fintan and I have been working on. It's all been pre-budgeted and as I said, been working on for a long time.
I think, again, which is important for everybody, watching this, Sam, is that, we made the decision to come in-house, but the decision to invest the cash was actually made after this had happened. So this is, we as a board have invested substantial capital in the current circumstances to enable us to, provide the sort of service for our supporters in terms of making sure they can get what they want when they want it.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, Fintan, from a numbers, is it a better thing to have the control and have the knowledge of what stock you're ordering and how much you're going to make on shirts, and obviously the amount of which you can spend on, you've got to set up an online store, you've got to staff the store, you've got marketing aspects, but working with a third party, you don't have that control, do you? So in a way, it's a better thing to have it coming in-house.
Yeah, absolutely. You've obviously got to resource it, Sam, but yeah, having control of it is way better for us. There's no doubt about that.
So I guess one from Geordan, and I would think Fintan will certainly have some thoughts on this one too, is I imagine that now we've got the tick to return to phase 1 of training, and then potentially, obviously, that takes steps forward into moving into playing games again, however they are in stadia. I'm imagining that there's a cost to actually returning to training, in terms of not only whether the furlough process or how that continues, but the actual medical cost now will be much more than it previously was, because as we've seen reported and as we've seen in football and rugby league in Australia, there's a serious amount of money that needs to be spent on PPE, on consistent testing, and I would imagine more resources in a medical department. So what planning is in place there? I guess, Geordie, if you start, what's the club doing to be ready for that phase 1?
Yeah, as you said, it's not nice for Fintan, but we have to spend more money on getting the place safe. Obviously, we're going to, at stage 1, we're going to practice social distancing, but we still are going to need testing. We still are going to need PPE gear. We still are going to need adjustments to the facilities that we use to make sure that everyone is safe. And obviously that is pretty extensive. It's great that the club is supporting, but there will be a cost to returning to play that wasn't factored in occasionally. We don't know exactly how that is because we haven't had the out and out final stage 2 plans yet, but we know that we are going to have testing. We know we're going to have gear. Even a simple thing on how a player would get strapped up at stage 1 is going to be, a costly thing to do in order to make sure that they're safe in order to train.
Is there a figure, Fintan? might be putting too much pressure on you there, but
no, not at all. I mean, I've put the pressure on Geordie for that, so let's wait and see what he comes up. And I think, look, just focusing on it though, I think it's very important to understand that there are certain costs that we can quite rightly eliminate from the club where we might be a little bit inefficient. But returning to play like this, these costs are a must for us to return to play. We can't avoid them, and we will plan appropriately for them to ensure that the boys can get back playing safely and as soon as possible.
Mm.
So I guess to pick up on that point, when you talk about cost cutting, what are those looking like in the short term? If I put the pressure on you, Andrea, I guess on this one, unfortunately, can you divulge a little bit about, I know furlough is one, obviously, and everyone is well aware of the furlough, and both players and quite a lot of staff are on furlough. I know staff and players have taken pay cuts, of which, misreported at times around how that process underwent or whatever you want to call it. But those people have done that to help the club. Mm-hmm. What is further being done?
Okay, I think it's every line in the budget is being looked at. Everything and every opportunity that we can to reduce costs whilst ensuring that Geordan and the team have what they need to get us back on the pitch. That's the paramount. Rugby is our business. That's what we're all here for. I mean, that's what it is all about ultimately. So we need to make sure that those costs are covered and that we are able to get back to the top of the game. Therefore, every line in every budget is being looked at. Yes, we are taking advantage of the government furlough scheme. We have all taken a pay cut, and everyone, I really genuinely have to say this, that everyone has been so supportive of that, because people realise that this is about getting Leicester Tigers through this and them pushing on. So whatever robust conversations might have taken place, and quite right that they should. Why wouldn't they? That it's a good thing in business. Certainly, I think it's a good thing in business that those robust conversations happen, and so that people are informed and that transparency and all the information is there for everyone to understand what we need to do as a collective. And unfortunately, that does also include looking at staff. It's sad, and it's a result of where a lot of businesses are in the world, that one of those cost saving options is looking at potential redundancies throughout the club, what that looks like, how we can operate, how we can perform whilst going through a process of consultation with staff to say, look, this is where we are now, this is where we need to get to, but once we pair back up, if we do have to lose some really good people that we've got, then we want to be able to get them back if circumstances allow us and them to do that. But unfortunately, that is something that we are going through at the moment as a process, and it's very hard for all of the employees, all the staff. It's really hard because we can't all get in a room and talk about it. We can get in a virtual room and talk about it, but you miss a lot of the sort of emotional intelligence and sort of reading people and seeing who might need more help than others. But again, as Fintan says, we're trying to work our way through this as best as we possibly can, with as much respect and transparency as we possibly can. And hopefully in the future that will allow us to grow again and revisit any redundancies that we may have to make.
I guess from your perspective, Peter, if I can ask, emotionally, I imagine it's taking a toll on the fact that, like Andrea's saying, good people who have already left. We've already had some high-profile departures of, even recently in terms of some people from Oval Park, of which the COVID impact was felt. From your perspective, Peter, it must be quite an emotional time in terms of knowing that your club, our club, is having to lose people of which what make it great.
No, it's. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't wrap this up in anything. I mean, unfortunately, part of, my responsibility is to make the decisions that unfortunately do affect people's lives and stuff. It's not something we do lightly, and it's something that is the worst aspect. Anybody will tell you who gets into a management position is having to tell colleagues that unfortunately, there's no longer a job for them, and you can't wrap it up. It's brutal, but that's, I shouldn't be here if I can't do it. And we are, and I think again, we did create the emergency fund to help people. We've been helping people with some, without breaking any confidence, with sort of some of the mental issues and stuff like that. And all we can try and do is to make sure it's done, properly, with respect for everybody and face to face. I think the worst thing is if these things are done behind people's backs rather than, and as Andrea correctly said, it's much more difficult because you can't sit in a room, do it face to face, and allow people to express how frustrated they might be with some of those decisions. But as we said at the beginning, our job is to ensure that Tigers are at the top in 10, 20 years' time.
Geordie, from your perspective, as Peter mentions, you're trying to plan for a return to training in a couple of weeks. You're trying to plan for a new season, effectively sort of starting from July 1st in terms of bodies and a new look squad and a new look Leicester Tigers, obviously with Steve's arrival. How challenging has it been to, given that a redundancy process is now underway, or if that's right, Andrea, but how hard has it been to, I guess, keep people motivated during that period, especially at Oval Park? I'm not taking away from Welford Road, but certainly given that the pressure's on Oval Park to restart in a couple of weeks, how are you handling that? And obviously yourself going through a change in role as well.
Jan's talked about it at the top end. We're in unprecedented times. It's very, very difficult for everyone across the world, and we're all in tough positions. Rugby is our priority, and trying to get out on the field, and the people that go alongside of that are my priority. It's been challenging because obviously of the uncertainty, and we don't know exactly where the finish line is. We're intending to be back training at stage 1 in mid-June, and that will be some social distancing training, and obviously that throws problems up. Stage 2, which will be more resembling what rugby looks like, will be far more challenging, and obviously again we've talked about that. There's a lot of people who are working around the team. Everyone is fully focused and wants to see the team back out on the field and performing. So most of the people who are in and around the environment are fully supportive of where we are as a club. We're very lucky to have some great people involved with this club, and the most important thing is the club and sort of where the club comes through and how the club comes through this pandemic.
From your perspective, Jan, does this have any bearing on you looking at squad sizes moving forward? I know the game is addressing that. I know there's a salary cap conversation going on. It's been well reported, but does this have any bearing on, while staff sizes are going to have to come down, is that the same for a playing squad?
I think it is quite a complicated equation almost. As you say, you're taking into the context of what might happen, and we might come on to that with regards to the miners' report and the salary cap. But we're also looking at potentially, we've got a large group of development players that might be getting their rugby away from first team games. So we're looking at whether the A-League exists, the Premiership Cup exists. If the Championship doesn't restart till the new year because they want to play in front of crowds because they're reliant on a large proportion of gate receipts, that means that some of those development players might not be getting game time at the appropriate times. But I think we also, we've got to continue to look at this positively. I think the squad size at the moment, we've brought it down somewhat from what it was, but it's more to do properly the quality of that. And we've got the opportunity to get our new coaches on some of those players earlier than we possibly anticipated. So we're hoping we can get them better. We've also got the opportunity in some instances where we might have been looking at players playing a slightly lower level. Because of the cuts at, say, Championship clubs, we might be able to help those clubs with players and give our players some better opportunities that we might have done historically. So I just think we have to remain positive. The reality is, we will do what we have to do with regards to the squad size, but all of the conversations we've had to this point on this call have all been about ensuring that we're in the best possible shape to try to perform at the best possible level on the pitch. So I don't envisage huge changes in that squad size. I just envisage us having to think outside the box somewhat more around game opportunities for our players.
I know we touched a few weeks ago on the fact that the timing was as bad as it could be for you and Geordan in terms of renegotiating with players and actually not being able to physically do that. Andrea, as Fintan alluded to, given that the financial year is coming up, I imagine the timing of the pandemic was in a similar form terrible, like it was for Jan and Geordan, around the way in which we were dealing with partners and potential looking at how to get more and more revenue or renewing revenue streams. The pandemic's timing couldn't have been worse, could it? Well,
interestingly, in March is our typical going out to our corporate client time. So that's your 1880 and your box holders, and asking them to commit to us for another season to 3 seasons, and obviously their businesses are affected. Nobody knows how they will be affected coming through the other side. So that had to come to a stop. It's not the time for us to be saying, do you want to spend money on hospitality, when they're trying to again, like us, maintain jobs and look at costs. So there is an element of that. The season tickets, because we have the direct debit scheme, that was already in place, and that primarily is just to enable people to be able to spread the cost if they wish to do so. So that's kept in place. And what we have done is said, you won't lose your seats, you don't have to make the decisions now, because look, it's impacting everybody across the world. And I think Fintan made the point earlier, and it's exactly the right one, that it's how you deal with it and come out the other side and you manage the situation that we're in. None of us have been in this before. Geordan, as you say, he is taking on the role of DOR. He has got to work through what all of that means with getting the players back in training and playing games. And the business side of the club has got to work out financially, what that means, but also for the fans. How do we get them back? Look, we all want to go to Welford Road and watch the lads win a game. That's the be on it. And so everything we're doing is trying to get us all back to that point.
Fintan, to be as blunt as I can, if it's okay, at what point is the tipping point? At what point do you see the timeline being that, unfortunately, if things do not improve, and if something does occur where a start date is then postponed even further, is there a point in which the club can no longer carry on, certainly at the current size?
You have a crystal ball, Sam?
Not with me today, no. Sorry.
Well, look, I think we've all seen from the press, and we've seen certain sports are now returning. So football, horse racing, etc. What's proven difficult, obviously, is a sport like rugby, purely because of the nature of the close contact. So it's very, very difficult to put a finger on when we'll return, although I believe there is some clarity starting to come around that now, and whether we can get fans safely back into the stadium, and if and when. What I can say is that we were in a very strong position moving into the pandemic. We're working through the pandemic, and I've got the utmost confidence that with all of our stakeholders, our fans, the bank, shareholders, sponsors, PRL, RFU and BT, that we will work through this and we won't reach that tipping point. But we are planning for all circumstances.
As Fintan alludes to, Peter, I guess the question then is, from supporters, a lot's going to be asked of supporters and has already been asked of supporters over the past couple of months. Andrea's laid out what will essentially be what's going to be asked of them or offered to them. The question from fans may be, what are those major shareholders doing as well? Additionally, what are major shareholders doing? As you say, the CVC money was reinvested, of which I think, if I'm right, Fintan, is what you're alluding to in what helps us be in a better position coming into this situation.
Correct.
But the question, Peter, if I can ask it without being too blunt, is fans will want to know what major shareholders are doing. And I guess if I lead you somewhat, it's some of those changes in the board and executive have been some of those decisions the shareholders, major shareholders in the board have had to take?
I mean, I think that, you know, for me, the most important decision that we made first was for the money to be invested in the business, which is why Fintan's able to answer in the way that he has, you know, and that pushes your tipping point further away. You know, myself and Tom and other shareholders are very, very committed to the club. And, you know, as we've said in our previous interview, none of us take any money out of it. And for me, I think we're today, you know, June the 3rd, we don't know what's coming, although it is beginning to clear a bit. We're in a pretty strong position. And, you know, as Fintan mentioned, you know, all of our partners in this season, everybody else, the banks, are all supportive. So I think we're actually, without answering your question, you know, we're in a very good position. And, you know, I think the decision we made to not to go ahead with the car park, to put the hotel for somebody else to do, so there's no consequences financially to us, benefits in the future when the hotel's finished from having a hotel on site. So I think, and the other bit for me that is probably the most important bit is that I do genuinely believe that, you know, we're going to come out of the other side of this in a significantly stronger position as a group of people and as a club. And I think that will be reflected, without putting pressure on Geordan and Stephen, in what happens on the pitch. I do genuinely think this has changed all of us in a way that is incredibly positive as far as Tigers are concerned.
So Fintan, as the fresh eyes, I guess, to try and drive home what Peter's mentioned there, and he mentioned in the first time we spoke to him on LTTV, is there is certainly no cost cutting being undertaken. And as Andrea alludes to, with redundancies, and if community programs do suffer, this is not being done to make sure that shareholders are getting more money back or the same that they were before. This is being done to ultimately see Leicester Tigers through the process and to come out stronger.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. You know, the shareholders, I don't believe, have taken money out of the club. I think they have been very, very positive investors in the club. I think you can see the nature of the stadium that we have, obviously. The investment in the squad, Geordie, Steve, and all of that coaching team is a fantastic investment. So, yeah, everything is geared towards making Tigers as successful as they have been in the past.
You mentioned Geordie and the team. Geordan, to, I guess, ask you the question, I can see that you are there at Oval Park today, so the planning continues, the preparation continues. Obviously, you've got quite a lot of social distance around you, just to clarify that for anyone out there. I don't want to get you in trouble, but does this change anything for you? I know we alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I'm imagining behind the scenes there was some big plans in place. It's a new look Leicester Tigers from the board down, but specifically in the rugby, there's a new look Leicester Tigers coming to train at Oval Park on July 1st. And I'm imagining that you've had to reassess and replan some elements of what you had in place.
Yeah, 100%. We've had to tweak plans. You know, I think that's just par for the course or nature of where we're at. I think the club is still saying all the right things. You can see how passionate everyone on this call are about the club, and that's what we're about. We want to be back on the right end of where we think we can get to. Yeah, you know, you're always going to tailor plans in times like this, but the core product for us is the rugby, and everybody here wants to, as Andrea said, wants to see the team on the field performing and winning, and that's what the fans want, and that's what everybody who is associated with the club wants. How we get there, obviously, we have questions to ask, but we are planning and contingency planning for different scenarios. We're hopeful that as of July 1, we'll have a new squad here together working, a new coaching team, and really building in order to make us successful again. I, as an individual, feel, you know, incredibly well supported in everything I've done, and you know, it's taken us a bit of time, and change always does take time to build the right team and the right processes. But certainly, I feel that the journey has begun. It's been made more challenging by pandemics and the like, but we'll come through the other side, and we'll be in a stronger position, as Peter said.
From your perspective, obviously players have taken a wage cut, and I know plenty of people out there who unfortunately have a perception that they do it for the money. I would imagine that while they're earning 75% of their previous wage, they're certainly not training at 75% or committed at 75% of what they were.
No, it's not possible. And the guys that we have in the squad are winners. They want to compete. They want to work hard. Even through the furlough process, they've been working hard on a daily basis, and they've been getting themselves in the best shape that they possibly can. And when they get back to Oval Park, we'll push them on to that next level as well. So we're making advancements in our fitness and in our strength. They've all taken pay reductions, as have people across the globe. But as you say, the commitment hasn't wavered in any way.
Yeah, and I guess one thing Leicester Tigers has always been very proud of, and said very proudly from an external point of view, is that we spend up to the cap, and only up to the cap. Obviously, in recent days, we've seen the Lord Miners report accepted by all of the Premiership clubs. How that plays out now is for another time, not necessarily for this conversation. But I would imagine now, I guess if it's two parts, is one, will we spend up to the cap next season and beyond? And what's the impact of those accepting the Miners report on your role now looking forward?
I think we kind of, you almost have to take a step back to take a step forward. So let's look at the state of the game. The state of the game is in the last 2 years, the 12 clubs have lost a collective of £89 million. So at some point, a line has to be drawn in the sand. Now, whether it takes a global pandemic to suddenly realise that we're losing so much money, it's a shame it's actually come to that. But the reality is we want all businesses in sport more often than not to try to cover their face at least, not necessarily make profit. And I think what this has allowed is conversations to be had to how to address how do we make the significant changes to allow every single club to be here in 20, 50 years' time. So as a consequence of that, one of the most accelerated areas of growth has been players' wages over the last 5 years. And so whether that be a combination of marquee players coming into the market, the salary cap increasing, or match payments at international level increasing, it's basically taken this pandemic for us to actually take a collective look and say, actually, this can no longer go on. So I think what the Miners report will do, and what this has actually had to do to make players aware, is the fact that you have been in a very privileged position, which a number of them get, but also in some capacity earning levels of earnings which way outstrip probably what the worth is to the club. So I'm actually it probably sounds, and most agents would probably say, obviously it's because I'm working for a club rather than being an agent again. But the reality is we do have to make these decisions for these businesses to continue. Now, I'm actually quite positive about this again, because I do believe we've got now the strength and depth in our squad, our infrastructure as a business, to actually make the most of ourselves as a club and actually what are our strongest assets. So I think we're in an incredibly great position to attract players, whether it's for a slightly less wage, but what we can offer them as being part of Leicester Tigers. So yes, there are going to be some initial conversations which are going to hurt, but I think one of the points that Andrea touched on earlier is like all of these conversations, whether it's about potential redundancies, potential sponsors having to leave, it's all about transparency and honesty. If you can actually explain to players what has gone on around the world, what is going on in our league, and you're actually just honest with them, then the reality is I don't think many players at clubs get a lot of transparency. They get a line around, this is what we believe you're worth. But actually, if you can put it into the context of maybe other players in the squad, what's happening in the world game, I've got no qualms about sitting down with any player in our squad explaining that, with Geordie, with Steve, whoever. But ultimately, we recognise the value of our players. We also recognise what the values of players are in the global market. And so there is going to be an effect, which is not just going to be in the Premiership, it will be in France, it will be in other markets, even in Japan, because I know a lot of people pointing to that market. But that's probably 6 months behind us. They're going to be affected as well. You've seen the state of the game in the Southern Hemisphere. No one knows what Super Rugby is going to look like. We've had the knock-on effect where even Argentinian players are suddenly having to look to Europe to secure employment because there's going to be no Super Rugby in Argentina. So everyone is going to be affected by this. The earning capacity of a rugby player will come down. It's not going to put them on the street, but it will basically just come down in line with actually what the outgoings of a business are so we can survive. So again, I think we're in a great position. I think we've got the support of the club, great supporting coaching staff, and we will get through this and actually be better as a consequence of this.
how hard is it for you at the moment in terms of looking beyond the current season and next season? I know the current season, there's no changes to the squad, but for next season and beyond, if you go into 2021-22, how hard is it for you with an unknown number to play with?
I think that is probably, in 20 years of kind of doing this on both sides of the fence, that's probably going to be my hardest, probably recruitment year. I think that, as is touched on there with the potential reduction of player salaries, it is going to be a balancing act. And I think what we have to ensure is probably learn from the mistakes of the past. So we know that you can't be overly reliant on England players because they're going to be away for a large percentage of the year. There's still a large question mark around potential alignment of the global season, whether that even comes into effect. But we know that players are going to potentially be asked to play a bit more internationally, and no one knows what those windows will look like, when there will be. So what we have realised is I think we're going to have to be dependent a bit more on our development squad and give them opportunities to play. So whereas you may, say, carry 4 players in one position, you might have to carry 3 with a reliance on the development squad. But I think when you're starting to have conversations, and we'll probably, as I say, we're going to have a number of potentially awkward conversations that if, for argument's sake, the salary cap is reduced in a year's time, and if, for example, a player's on a 3-year contract and their contract has to be reduced in order to effectively fit in line with the reductions in the cap, then you will actually understand those that genuinely want to play for the club. So it sounds pretty callous. I think the reality is we want players to come through the system, play for this club all their career, and go on to be fans on the other side, as we've seen some of your guests over the last few weeks for exactly those types of individuals. We also know that we've kind of gone through a really tough time as a club, but what it's done is actually given us an opportunity to have a collective spirit and actually say, this is Leicester Tigers. We're going to do what we feel is right to get us through that, whether that's from a playing squad, from a staff perspective, from a sponsor's perspective. But ultimately, you stick with us, we're going to get through this and be stronger. And I think we've got to utilise what we can to make ourselves stronger. And I do think this will be one of those opportunities.
To wrap it up, because I appreciate it's gone on quite long, and you all have, well, you wouldn't be here if you didn't have important things to do. So not saying those that aren't here don't have important things to do. But I guess if I can ask, and I'll probably just direct it to Andrea from an overall perspective, is just how difficult is it at the moment, given that you've got, I guess, hands in both pies of Welford Road and Oval Park? Just how difficult is the unknown element in all of this? Because, as you say, you're planning for every outcome, but I would imagine at some point, every now and then, you just want to throw your arms in the air and say, someone give me an answer, because I want to move forward and I want to be able to define something. And Fintan's chasing me for a figure, but I can't get him. Or Geordan's asking me when he can return. Or Jan's saying he's got a great player who's coming through from, you know, even the chairman, I'm sure, is ringing up and saying, come on, give us an answer. But no, it's out of your hands. And I know you might not be able to answer, but just how difficult has it been?
I think you've just answered it perfectly. I think you've answered your own question, because that's exactly my life right now. No, look, it's of course it's challenging. You know, I have taken this role on in the middle of a global pandemic where we're losing £5 million, where we don't have rugby at Welford Road. And, you know, there are challenges, but like anything, it's how you pull together and how you work through them, and how you come out the other side. Is it frustrating that we can't actually get decisions and timeframes? Absolutely. But it's frustrating the world over. You know, this is not just Leicester Tigers, it's not just rugby, and it's certainly not just the UK. So you have to deal with those frustrations. You do have to throw your hands up in the air and ring the chairman and shout and let off some steam. You know, and you have to get through it. But I think, you know, look, the most important thing, we've been on here, we've been talking about, you know, money and the financial situation and the impact that it's having. But, you know, I just think we need to be very grateful for our fans, be that the season ticket holder, be that the sponsor, whoever it is, that they are here to support us. The wider Leicestershire, East Midlands fan base is here to support us as well. We will be coming out with these opportunities for people to make a decision about what they want to do, and we're genuinely grateful for that, and we're just trying to steer us through this, like everybody is the world over.
And look, I guess the only thing I can ask at the end of this, because it wouldn't be an LTTV interview if I didn't ask the question, Geordan, do you have any player announcements?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Well, look, I appreciate all of your time. I appreciate that it's not usually things that maybe you're asked in a public forum, and you all accepted when the invitation went out. Admittedly, I was a little bit worried you might not, I won't lie, but you've faced up and fronted up throughout the period. So I do appreciate your time. I'm sure, as always, Leicester Tigers fans will find more questions following an answering of questions. But as you've now done it, you've got to do it again at some point. So I'm sure I'll see you all soon. So thank you. And I guess thank you on behalf of the fans too for what you're doing. So, and Geordie, I'll probably see you later this week when you can finally give me some of those announcements.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks,
everyone.